Welcome to Season 6 of the Hey Girl podcast with your host and my mom, Bethany Needham. This season, we get to hear stories from guests who are running their race in their place right where God has them. We hope that these stories will encourage and inspire you to do the same. If you want more information or to connect with my mom, go follow us on Instagram at HeyGirlGram, friend us on Facebook at HeyGirlPod, or even better, head to BethanyNeedham.com and sign up for our email list so that you can get all the Hey Girl tea. All right, it's time to grab a cup of coffee or your favorite seltzer. Here's my mom.
Hey girls, and welcome back to another episode of the Hey Girl podcast. This week, we get to talk with my dear friend, Regina Bartlett. And y'all, if you don't already know Regina, you are in for a treat. But before we get to the episode, just a reminder that we have launched our brand new business, Hey Girl Fitness. And as we began this new season of Hey Girl podcast, we wanted to continue to encourage you, our listeners, to run your race in your place. But now with Hey Girl Fitness, we get to help you train and equip yourself for your race. I get it. There are seasons in our journey where running our race in our place feels like an uphill climb. It could be relationships, work, health, or just the daily mundane grind of life. But every step feels slower and more difficult. Friend, you're not alone, and we want to invite you to journey with us in our Take Your Mountain Challenge. For 60 days, we're going to commit ourselves to moving our bodies intentionally towards building strength and increasing our endurance. We will fill our minds and hearts with truth from God's word, reminding us that we are more than conquerors. Finally, we get to do this together in community, encouraging one another, cheering each other on, and allowing God to use us in each other's journey. Now, this challenge is for everyone. Doesn't matter your fitness level or physical limitation, it's designed to meet you wherever you're at and encourage you forward into the race that God has set before you. This challenge is also for everyone, regardless of beliefs or denomination. We will be unapologetically pointing to Jesus and his word throughout this challenge, but we firmly believe that Jesus doesn't require you to believe in him or agree with him to spend time with him and his people. So you are welcome on this journey with us. Head on over to BethanyNeedham.com for more details and to sign up. I can't wait. All right, y'all, it's time. Grab yourself a seltzer, a warm, cozy blanket, and jump in on this conversation that I get to have with the incredible Regina Bartlett. I am here today with my dear friend, Regina Bartlett. How are you doing?
I am doing so well. It's so good to be back here.
Girl, it has been too long. And when I saw your name come up on the booking calendar, I'm not going to lie, I freaked out a little bit inside in like the best way. I'm like, Regina's back.
Thank you.
So obviously this is to say that you have been on Hey Girl before. So if listeners want to go back and check that out, they can. But we are going to go through, obviously give them some backstory today as well. And I cannot wait. I cannot wait because we haven't talked to each other in so long. I feel like there's so much to catch up on.
It was like a 2-year hop of living. I feel like we all lost like 2 COVID years and everything is like, wait, how long was that? Oh, wait, that was 5 years? Like, who knew?
Yeah, it's crazy. So for people who maybe don't know you, which I'm sorry for them, but I'm sure they exist, why don't you just take some time and introduce yourself? Let us know all the things about Regina that I love.
You are the best. So my name is Regina Bartlett. I am 50. I turned 50 this past year, so it's like a beautiful thing. I didn't think that I would like love 50, but I really love 50. It's just been fantastic. But my story begins long before 50. So I met you the first time because I had written a book, and I had met you at Camp Berea,
Yeah.
which is an amazing place and still one of my favorite places on planet Earth. Um, and it was an odd occurrence that I would be even speaking to anyone about how Jesus has made incredible moves in my life. I spent many years as an atheist, like so many years. I had the hardest time with God. I was really close with God when I was younger, and then there was like a lot of situations that just really I lost faith in a big way. I really thought that God wasn't a big fan of mine, and I was like, well, fine, I'm not a big fan of yours either. And yeah, that worked out really great. So I just ended up struggling through so many parts of my life. And it wasn't until the man who's now my husband, Jeff, who's just the most lovely human, like really just a lovely human being. When I met Jeff, one of our first conversations was, do you believe in God? And he said, no. And I said, me either. And we literally high-fived and went to dinner. Like, that was the beginning of our relationship. We look back at that now and we're like, what was wrong with us? So we were both felt like we were kind of left behind and failed by our respective churches growing up. And it wasn't until I had attended a play, of all things, when people think like, oh, this isn't a big deal or that doesn't matter. It's like, ooh, the power of planting a seed is wild. And like, God uses
Amen.
all kinds of things to get to his people. Like, so it was really, I was that parent that, although I was not a big fan of church and had no intention of ever going again, I was perfectly fine with my neighbor bringing my daughter to church. I was that family. That was me. I signed more permission slips to Berea without ever having gone there in my life. And so
That's amazing.
it's crazy, right? So there was a play that my daughter's church was doing, and she was in the crew. And then the neighbor who used to take my daughter to church is actually my mother's best friend. And her 5-year-old granddaughter, whose name, of course, is Faith, says, Miss Regina, will you come see me in the play? How can you not, right? Like, how can you not? So I go to the play, and my daughter was in the crew anyway. So here we are. And the play was absolutely the most powerful thing I'd ever seen, like unbelievable. It had all of these themes that I didn't understand. And they're talking about the rapture, and I'm literally watching the play, Googling, what is the rapture? Like, no idea. And so I'm like going through and just absolutely fascinated by the whole thing. And so my husband and I, when we were still dating then, we really enjoyed it. We didn't quite understand the whole thing. We literally had to do more research for it. So we did. But here was the thing that changed everything, was my daughter, who had been attending church at that point for 9 years.
Wow.
She was 14 years old, and she said, did you like the play? And we were like, yeah, we did like the play. She goes, do you guys want to come to church? And we were like, no. But how could you say no? She had never in 9 years asked us to attend, ever. And so for her to ask, we were like, okay. And that morning, I just remember both Jeff and I like, I feel bad for these people. Like, do they know that the roof of the church may very well fall in when we walk in? Do they know what kind of crazy heathens we are? And we're going to just walk into this church with this unsuspecting group of people who have no idea that this might be the end for them. Like, this is terrible. And so we walk in. Now, I grew up going to Catholic church, and my husband grew up going to Episcopalian church. And fine, just different. So this was a like non-denominational evangelical church, which I had zero experience in, none. And we walk in, and we were quite taken aback because in Catholic church, it's a very different liturgical experience. So there was a lot of, they had the 3 songs on the board. Oh, that was pretty much the tone of every single song. Like, it was just hymns. You got 3 of them. You do the thing. Kneel, sit, stand. Kneel, sit, stand. It was like a whole thing. And so here we are now as adults walking into this evangelical church with 0 background, none. And everyone starts to stand and they're clapping and the hands are up. And we are just like, what is going on? Like, this is not your mama's church. Like, what is this? But the craziest thing happened. There was a husband and wife that were leading worship that day. And I knew nothing about what was happening. I didn't get the music. I didn't get the actions. I didn't get any of it. But what I did get was that I had no idea what they had. I just knew I wanted it. And it was so incredibly beautiful to see. It was like I could witness joy, pure joy coming from people. And it was almost like foreign. I lived an entire life, like in my mind, hating my body, hating everything. It just to witness this sort of pure, unadulterated joy coming from people. What is that? And so based on the conversation I'd had with my then fiance several years earlier of, our little no God high five, let's go. And now here we are at a crossroads because I thoroughly enjoyed church and I was almost terrified to tell it. And so we get home and we didn't say anything about it for hours, neither one of us. And so it's just like, is he going to say something? And she's thinking, is she going to say something? And finally, it was probably like 9 o'clock at night. We'd gone the entire day without discussing what happened in church because both of us was afraid that one would like it and one didn't, and almost afraid to share how we felt because we didn't know how it would be received. And so I finally was like, what did you think about service today? And Jeff goes, but I'm like, oh man, no. And then he goes, I really liked it. I said, me too. And that was in 2009 and we've never left. So it was like, what? And it just set a course of just learning and understanding and really kind of digging into the word and understanding what that really means and knowing that, the catechism that I went through when I was growing up is just a teeny tiny part of this full relationship with God. And I had no idea. And so we both just kind of dove in head first without care, just craziness. And then in tandem with that, so I had been over 400 pounds most of my life. And so it was just kind of like it just becomes a part of you. Like I got to a point where I'm just like, I'm never going to be healthy. I'm never going to be happy. Like who's going to love me? Like whatever. So you just kind of throw it all the way down. So when I met Jeff, I was about 400 pounds and we had met through friends. And he is 8 years older than me. And I thought he was just adorable. He thought that I was too young. He thought that I would think that he was too old is really the thing. And I thought that he would think that I was too heavy. And so we just kind of hung out as friends for months and months and months. And then finally, one day we were just together and I went to hug him and he kissed me. And I was like, what? Okay. I'm like, shut up. And I just remember thinking, what is wrong with him? Like, there has to be something wrong with him, right? Like, there has to be. Like, why? And so we would like talk and all this stuff. And you just always in the back of your head thinking like, oh, the shoe's going to fall. Like, he's one day going to be like, what am I doing here? No. And he has always been just the most incredible person. I always say that Jeff loves my heart, not what was whatever wrapped around it. He always made me feel like the most beautiful person in a room. Like without question. And that is incredibly powerful to a person who has never, ever felt that, to have that full, like, oh my gosh, this is real. This is actually real. He really loves me. And it was almost like shocking to me, let alone the rest of the world. And so it was really an amazing thing. So when we started going to church, so now we have this, our relationship is now shifting, and we're learning, and we're like really digging into God's word. And I start really thinking about my health and what's going on. And we were getting ready for our wedding, which was coming up. This was in 2009, 2010. We were getting married in 2011. And I just sat there, and it was the first of the year. On January 1st of 2014, my daughter wanted to help me clean my office because she is a neatnik, and I struggle with neatnik in my office especially. So it was like, oh, here we go. And I almost fell down the stairs, and I was terrified that she was going to find me hurt at the bottom of the stairs. And I was just like, I'm done. Like, I have to do something. And I started looking into weight loss surgery and praying and trying to see if this is right, God, like, please help. Like, I clearly cannot do this by myself. I have been super morbidly obese since I was 12 years old. Like, I'm done. It's been 30 years. Like, what can I do? And I'm flipping through this magazine, and I see an article from a doctor. And the doctor said, he's a cardiologist, he's like, every day I take a vein out of somebody's leg and I thread it through their heart, and nobody thinks that's drastic. But that's drastic. But you talk about weight loss surgery and everybody thinks it's drastic. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm looking at it the wrong way. That if I was to have a heart bypass surgery, no one would question it. It would be like, you must be crazy to not have it done. But then to have gastric bypass, people are like, ooh, maybe you should try this. Have you tried 3 small, responsible meals a day? Like, oh, shut up. No way. I had no idea. Thank you. So it was this whole journey of things all converging at once. And I ended up having weight loss surgery. And I ended up kind of saving my life. Like, God put all the pieces in place for me to make this clear and competent decision. And when I had weight loss surgery, I discovered that I spent an inordinate amount of my life clearly obsessing over food. Like, when I had surgery, I'm like, okay, so I can't really eat much. And then I realized that if I wasn't actively eating, I was either preparing food or thinking of future food, and now I have all this time. And I was like, I have to do something, and you have to start moving. And so I started taking steps in front of my TV, because I went outside once and someone said something really rude to me outside of their car. So I was like, I'm not going back outside again, ever. And so I just started, and then I started going back outside. And then my friend was going to run the New York City Marathon, and she's like, who wants to do this with me? And I was like, I've wanted to run a marathon since Oprah ran one. So, all right, I'll go. And she was like, awesome. And I'm like, am I crazy? I am crazy. So I started training for the New York City Marathon. And that's where I spent more time in conscious communication with God. If you ever want to spend time with Jesus on a one-on-one, train for a long race, because you are there with nothing but your thoughts for hours sometimes. When you're doing a 14-mile training run after working all day, trust me, Jesus and I got real tight during this whole trip. But through that process, I wrote my book, Food, Sweat, and Fears, which is how I ended up here the last time. So that's a long-winded way of so where have you been?
So obviously we've been friends for a while. I love this story every time. First of all, you're a great storyteller, which makes it even more fun, but just so many parts of your story that resonate with things that I get so excited or passionate about, from what you mentioned about don't underestimate the power behind planting a seed, and just how that incredible, just the incredible way that God moved in having your neighbor inviting your daughter, and even just the longevity of this. Like you said, she was going to church for 9 years
Years. It's almost
before.
embarrassing sometimes. Like, how did she go that long? Never saw the inside of the church. Never.
But I think it could be such an encouragement to people who maybe hear that they have people that they've been praying for. And sometimes we think that a year feels like forever, like,
Forever.
God, I've been praying. And so to hear this story of, 9 years, because I mean, I know I'm assuming this, but I feel pretty confident in assuming that if your neighbor was bringing your daughter, then they were praying for you.
Oh,
And just like what a powerful story that is, even for them to have that after
yes.
9 years of praying, you come for this play. And then, as you said, then you guys go to church and you never leave. That's just, that's it.
It's
So,
been wild. Like, who would have ever thought? And so I look at people who are just like, oh, they're just never going to come around. They're never going to come around. It's like, no, 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 no. Please hold. You may not ever see them come around. And I have been blessed on, Berea gave me an opportunity to thank someone that had prayed for me eons ago. When I used to work in Connecticut, I worked with a woman who was just lovely. She was just a lovely person. And at that time in my life, I was a single mom. I had 2 small kids, and every minute of my life was struggle. It was like, okay, what bill do we pay today? Or do we get food? Or do we do this? Like, constantly. And I'm working like a dog and trying to make everything work. And it just seemed like nothing was coming together. And she was always so kind to me. And I couldn't believe it. And it's like, she was a person that if you think back, you're like, oh, if there was a person that I could talk to and just be like, you have no idea what I was going through, and how just your simple kindness went miles for me. So we're at Berea one year, and there she is. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, she's here. And so I see her and we say hi and we hug, and all that was like amazing. And God is like, tell her. And I'm like, oh, it's weird. No, like, stalk much? Like, it doesn't seem good, God. I'm like, I'm not going to say that. And sometimes we fight a lot. Like, I don't feel like I should say that. And God's like, adorable. Please go now. I'm like, fine. So it takes a couple of times sometimes with me. And so we were getting ready to leave. We were like literally in the parking lot. And I saw her, and she's got her friends, and they were getting ready to get in the car. And God is just like, I swear sometimes I feel God's like this. Go, Regina. Like, I'm done. I'm like, fine. And I went up to her and I told her, I was like, in the darkest time of my life, you were a lifeline of light for me. And I am so glad that God brought us here in this space, one of my favorite places, to be able to tell you how much that has meant to me, and how I don't think I could have survived that time without this one little steady beacon of light. Like, don't ever underestimate that smile in the hall. That could be everything to someone. And that was that for me. And she like burst into tears, and we were just bawling. And she was like, I never had any idea you were even struggling. I'm like, well, you try to keep like, oh, everything is great, everything. And inside I'm like, am I gonna get evicted this week? Like, how bad is this? Like, awful. And she was just always so nice. So to have that opportunity, not everyone has the ability of seeing their prayers come to life. And she was like, we would pray for you. She's like, we knew you were juggling a lot with the kids. She's like, but I had no idea that things were that hard. I'm like, oh, they were hard. They were like so hard. And she was like, oh, we would get together and we would just pray for your well-being, pray for your babies. And I was just like, oh. And now look, here we are. Look at where we are. Like, this is amazing. This is God. This is all God.
Man, I hope so many people are hearing this and one being encouraged, like you said, to not underestimate the power of their smile, of their just kindness to people, especially
Mm.
in this day and age, right? I heard a speaker say it recently that as Christians, in terms of living a set apart life, the bar has never been lower to just
So
be
true.
kind and loving. And so not underestimating that, but then I hope people hear this and people start coming to mind for them who have been that in their life, and that all of us would have the courage when we have the opportunity. Like if that person you have a connection or there's some way that you can get in contact, tell them like how much it
Absolutely.
means to them to hear those words, because you really don't know. Like you don't always know what someone's going through. And I think it encourages all of us to keep going, to, as scripture, don't grow weary in doing good, like keep
Yes.
on. And it matters and God's using it. So Miss Regina, first of all, 50 years old, are you kidding me?
Isn't
What
that
is
great? I
your
love that I'm 50.
skincare routine?
It's
Yeah,
so
you,
bad. It's abysmal. Like people say that to me all the time, and I'm like, soap and sometimes lotion. Like I am the worst. I'm like the worst.
well,
It's so
your
funny. I'm like,
face
I
does
hope it
not show
stays
that.
good. I feel like it's gonna be one of
Oh,
those like rapid successions. Like I'm gonna turn like 60, and it's all just gonna fall apart from years of like no lotion. I see these people with like serums and masking and this and the sprays and then that, and I'm like, oh my, soap, goodbye. That's the extent of my skincare routine.
yeah, I'm with you in terms of the lack of care I put into my skin. I've not had the same results that you were showing right now, but you know what? It's fine. It's fine.
It's coming.
I'm
It's
just,
coming. I think you
yeah,
look fabulous.
all, all my lines that I see increasing, I'm like, it's just a reflection of the smiling that has happened for
That's right.
years and years and
So
years.
true.
So we're gonna let them be. And
These grays
it's,
are definitely here, though you can't really tell them because I like to fortify my hair. So, whole ton of gray under here, like a lot. Just doesn't quite show so much.
well, at 50 then, I would love to know, what does it look like right now in this season of life? You're running your race in your place, looking fabulous, obviously.
Thank you.
But what does it look like in terms of serving Jesus right now and walking with him?
That's a good question because this is like a very different season for me, which is great. So I ended up, I did the New York City Marathon and I started taking karate. And karate has been an incredible, it's like a great humbling equalizer because I'm a person who I have a tendency to learn things quickly and do things quickly. And karate is not one of those things. It's like, oh, karate, did you know you are going to suck for an exceedingly long time? And then you're going to start being better, but you're not going to believe you're better. So you're still going to be like, oh my gosh, is this ever going to get better? And other people are like, one day I want to be like you. And you're like, what? That's karate. Karate is like, I highly recommend anyone who has anxiety like I do, take something that will pull you out of your comfort zone like a job. And that was karate. But I needed that kind of almost humbling, trying, like, and there is no perfection. So you keep running your race in your place and just small improvements through the way. When I got my black belt in 2020, it was truly one of the hardest things I've ever done. We got to the beach at 4:30 in the morning, where we proceeded to swim in full geese first, back and forth, And then we had to get out and run. And then we did all of our it was awful. My mom was there and she was just like, this is quite possibly the worst thing I have ever seen. I don't know why you do this. But I love it. I'm like wet, covered in snot, gross, absolutely a mess. Loved every second of it. So I got my black belt in 2020 as the world was literally coming apart at the seams. And everything went into kind of like a cocooning, all of the speaking events for 2020, everything, by March 25th, the whole year was wiped out for whatever you thought you were doing in 2020. Goodbye. That's not happening. And so we kind of had to shift into, okay, God, so what now? So I kind of poured myself into karate and working on my next book and trying to figure out like what, how we're going to work through this whole like pandemic landscape, like what that's going to mean. And I ended up 10 days after I got my black belt, hardest thing I've ever done. I opened a door at work and tore my meniscus. Literally opened a door. 5.5 hours on the beach, getting pummeled beyond recognition. And I opened a door and a mesh bag of like gator balls spilled out. And I lost my footing and I like caught myself and my knee goes this way. And I ended up completely tearing my meniscus on the outside. So now we're in this like protective cocoon of COVID pandemic. And now I can't move. I have to have knee surgery. Everything that I was doing is now at like a screeching halt. Everything. And it was like this whole process of like, okay, God is telling me to stop and figure out what I'm supposed to be doing next. Like, what is this next season looking like? And it was clearly a season of rest first. And then it was a season of trying to figure out through my rehabilitation and through my growth and through my Bible studies to kind of figure out like, okay, God, here we are. Where are we going now? And so now in this season in 2023, I'm finally well enough where movement is back in like a big way in my life. I had to stop teaching for a while, teaching Pound, which I love. And that was hard. And so now I'm back to teaching. I'm back in karate, which is great. My next 2 books are coming out really soon. So that's really good. And then speaking is back on the docket for 2023. So that is lovely. So it's been a time of development and really seeing where this new, more mature Christian outlook comes from, because honestly, I was like a baby Christian not that long ago. So it's been a whole lot of growth and a whole lot of learning. And now I feel like God is ready to move me using storytelling, which is one of my love passions, because we will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And I believe that to the center of my soul. Everyone has a story to share, and they can say it in a way that only they can say it. And it's going to be received by someone who needs to hear it in the way that you can deliver it. And so many people think that if they didn't have like sexual assault, domestic violence, drug problems, you have to have these big things to overcome in order to have a life of service to God or to be able to impart something to someone else. But I think one of the most powerful testimonies I ever heard was this sweet woman at my church. We do this second Sunday lunch at our church, and it's the ladies' lunch, and someone gives a testimony each month. And this woman led the most beautifully quiet life in absolute service to God. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Some people had to overcome a whole lot to get to God. Some people were just born in that way and they stayed there. She grew up in the church. She has loved Jesus her entire life. She has served him in so many ways. It was amazing. She didn't have to overcome crazy, insurmountable things. God is working through all of us in our own way, in what we have. because there's something in us and our experiences that's going to benefit someone else, which is going to glorify him. Everything that we share is not so that anyone sees me, it's so that they can see what he has done through this vessel that is me. And I want everyone to be comfortable in sharing these things, whether they are these great obstacles or these beautifully small experiences. It's all valuable, and it is all in glory to him. And I just want everyone to be able to share that. So that's my 2023 thing.
Amen. First of all, I'm excited for you. Second of all, I appreciate that word so much. It's been something that's come up even in a recent interview where we were talking about this idea of our testimonies and how there is and has been in the past often this idea of like, we all want to have this big testimony, this story of, whether it's addiction and that isn't even to say those things. I'm not trying to shame people that that's their testimony.
Right.
But the conversation came with, I just was thinking as we were talking through it, and I was like, really, our testimony, regardless of what we came from, the point of our testimony is not what we've done, but what Christ did. And so regardless of what was before, the heart of all of our stories and what we share is that we were dead and now we're alive in Christ. And anyone who is obviously a believer in Jesus, you have that story to share. And kind of like you mentioned, going to that church all those years ago with your daughter, you didn't understand what was going on, but something that they had, you knew you wanted. And that's that new life, right? When we're living that out, there's something that should attract people. And not always, some people don't always respond positively to it, but ultimately, like, we're called to live set apart. So as believers, when, this new life that we live, that people see that in us. And like you said, that it glorifies God, that it's not about us at that point. Like, this is nothing I could have done on my own. So, we all equally
trust
need
me,
Jesus.
I've tried. Even in the beginning,
I think we all have.
It was like God's will, Regina's way also doesn't work out so hot. So you kind of have to just yield. And I think that was one of the hardest things for a lot of people. I think everyone is pretty cool with Jesus being a savior. Everyone understands that we need that. That's not a hard sell for people. It's the Jesus is Lord. That's the one where people are like, oh, wait, so I got to follow these rules. I got to follow these instructions. Like, I have to listen to God when he talks. Like, those are the ones. It's that part that I think people struggle with. And just kind of letting people know that when you're in true service with God, it's never oppressive. And I think sometimes people feel like that if you're on the outside looking in at the things that we discuss or we cherish and we understand. People who are not believers often do not understand this sort of, like my husband's eye surgery. We have, like, he's been losing vision. He's a type 1 diabetic. That's pretty much par for the course for many diabetics, sadly. He ended up with 2 detached retinas. So he went from one day being able to see and the next day not. And for some people who don't understand what that suddenness in change could be, it was like you getting out of your car one day, shutting the door, and then not being able to drive it for the next 6 months, which is where he has been. And people would be horrified by that. There was so much peace that we received from our faith that a lot of people couldn't understand. They're like, he's being really good about this. Like, he could end up blind. And it's like, and if that's the case, we work through whatever that is. God has a plan for whatever this is, whether it's his vision is corrected, whether it's blindness, whether it's whatever it is. We are ready to take on because we know that he has a plan, that whatever this is will serve some sort of a purpose. Even if we don't feel it in our lives today, if for some reason Jeff loses his sight, is in some way in this epic long game of God going to benefit somebody down here, fine. I don't need to know what it benefits. And I think that's what a lot of people can't hold on to. They can't hold on to this. Things will happen. How we receive them is the key. And people who are people of faith, who have this absolute faith in Jesus, these things that could be very detrimental to other people, we still feel them. But we don't have to try to own it. We don't have to try to fix it. We don't have to do anything. We have to allow those things to happen. We can absolutely feel what we need to feel. We are told we can absolutely call upon God through prayer and have our requests made known to him. But we willingly accept whatever comes our way. And that is where a lot of people tend to think like, wow, they're a little weird. Like, how are you okay with this? It's like, because I know that ultimately we are merely passing through this place. So I will spend eternity with Jeff in sheer perfection. So we will do whatever we need to do here because we know we have that coming. And it is far greater than anything here. And what we have here is pretty great. So win-win.
Yeah. I mean, so much of what you're sharing, even all these verses coming to mind about in terms of unbelievers looking in, like scripture is clear that this is foolishness to them. Like, unless God reveals himself. And I think sometimes we forget that, like, he loved us first. Like, he has revealed these things to us. And even that's one of those things, without him, we wouldn't even understand. And then once we're in that relationship, as you're talking, the word trust is what keeps coming to mind. Is ultimately it's the lie that's as old as the Garden of Eden, right? Like, the first lie that the enemy tried to plant was for Eve to distrust what God said. And everything that you're describing right now is this: how can I walk through this? Because I trust God. Like, I have this relationship with God in such a way that even if I don't understand it, if I don't feel it, if it's not what I want, I still trust who God is, and I surrender that back to him. And isn't that, as believers, we're all called to that? I think at different times in our life, that there's easier seasons to walk that and more difficult, right?
Sure.
Like, yeah,
Sure.
but the beauty, or I guess to me, the thing that's so incredible is that God never changes. And whether we're struggling with it, whether it comes easy, that he is the same. So in terms of trusting him, that we can always place our trust in him because he's not going to change. And that's both a beautiful thing. And also for me sitting here, like, it's a challenge for me to remember that, like, God, when I don't, like, you are God and I am not. And we should all be grateful for that.
Yes. And it's true, like, some seasons are definitely harder than others. Some situations are definitely harder than others. But we have been gifted with this means of handling anything at all, in a way that would be different because we're set apart, because we were called for different. And we just have to continually honor that and remember that. And it's so easy. I think I find it most, especially in speaking in like groups of like younger girls, and you start to see that shift in them. And it's usually around like, it's actually earlier now, I think, like maybe 8 or 9, they start playing the comparison game, and everything is happening all at once for them. Like, they're mentally changing, they're physically changing, and they're getting bombarded with images, messaging, whether it's TV, whether it's school, whether it's wherever. It's just this constant barrage of understanding. Now, I grew up in the early 80s, And I don't think I could have imagined how my childhood would have been if every single thing I thought, said, or did was on Snapchat. Like, I don't understand how that would be. And I couldn't imagine navigating through that. And even my own children, although they were literally born plugged in, I mean, they've had Google forever. And I remember trying to explain to them, like, you have no means of waiting. You guys are not accustomed to waiting, because right now, if you want to know something, you can say it to your phone and she'll tell you like exactly what you're looking for. We used to have to like ride our bikes to the library, go through the card catalog, hope a book is there, try to find an answer. Like there's no discovery. And so with that lack of discovery, there's also a lack of patience because everything is now. And so now here are these girls at a time where you're questioning every single thing, where God should be that lighthouse beacon. And unless we, as the adult leaders, of the children of our church, the children of our lives, whether it's in church, our own children, whatever, we have to be that person that shows them where the lighthouse is and how they can always go back to the lighthouse and how it is there to protect you. And to, your worth and value is not out here. It's never been out here. But making sure that they understand God, and even through these questioning times as they're going through now, to be able to call back upon these things that they received in their foundation. Because I think it's almost inevitable that kids start to pull away. And unless they were equipped early, it makes it harder and harder for them to come back. I'm really impressed with the way our church handles the youth. And I mean, it's a progressive process. And they've been very successful with keeping kids in church through adulthood, which I've seen in a lot of places is generally much harder. I've seen it harder for sure. But yeah, that's with all of this messaging out in the world, we have to be the people that are out there in the front lines. I mean, my baby is 26 years old, so I have to actually lend out for the younger kids in our church as well, even though they're not my children. We are all children of God. One of the funniest things I ever heard is, God ain't got no grandkids, just sons and daughters. I think that's great. So we are responsible for everyone.
And Regina, I appreciate so much that as long as I've known you, you have been such an example of that light and of that example and
Thank you.
Of Jesus to people around you. And I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful that you're giving time to share that to our listeners, because I know that your story, it's always a blessing to people. I know it is going to be again. And so thank you. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing with us today and inviting us into your Boston hotel tonight.
Welcome.
If they hear
There's
sounds
like a
in the
painted
background.
body right here. It's lovely.
Yes.
I just realized.
It's a special background. I love it. Oh, well, thank you so much. As always, such a gift. And girl, I love you and cannot wait. Real quick, do your books that are coming out, are they named?
Yes. So the first one that's coming out is actually a writing prompt book. So it's a little bit different. Again, in theme of like how people need to share their story, and people often think that they have no story to tell. So my first book is on writing prompts, and it walks you through, like, ask very pointed questions about your life growing up in stages. And then the second half of the book, you go back to the first part and you try to think of, okay, so what is my story, and how we can almost like data mine these things from the writing prompt that'll help you create your story, whether it's spoken in a testimony, whether it's written, whether it's just shared with friends, but how we can become more comfortable in sharing these parts of yourself. And I do a workshop on vulnerability, and it's really important, I think, for people to understand, especially I think the church should be the safest place on the planet for women. and to have this place where women can open and be really comfortable, and not so much the Sunday finds, which is like, oh, is everything fine? It's like Sunday and everyone's in and out. But how we can create this culture of when you're not fine. These are the people that we should be able to be open with, and how we can build that culture of vulnerability in our churches. So that's what we got going on.
Man, I love it. I mean, I'm going to get these books. I'm just saying. Everyone should. So look it up,
I will
get on
just
the list,
mail
whatever
them
you got
to
to
you.
do.
Signed. I will sign it and send it to you.
Autographed. I'm fangirling right now. It's getting so hot in here.
It's so funny.
Regina, thanks so much for your time. And I can't wait for all that God has in store. So I'm sure that we will chat again in the days to come.
I hope so. It's been lovely. I miss you.